All right, guys, so we are going to explore different ways to creating a hollow form. Main reason is you can't really safely fire something like this, right? If it's solid, we have to make sure that our clay is never more than about a third of an inch thick or maybe a half inch at the very most. So I've got a few different things here. We're going to explore the different techniques. A couple of things you're going to need depending on which technique you use. You may need a piece of floss. This one's about 2 feet long. And I also have a paper clip, and you might need your slip. So I have that here, and maybe a fork or something to score with. Okay. So the first method of creating a hollow form is to have two pinch pots that are about the same size. So you can see I have my pinch pots here. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and score the edges. And I'm going to go ahead and slip the edges as well. When you make your score marks, make sure you give them a good scratching. Okay. I'm only going to put slip on one of these because the surfaces are going together and I don't want to have it be too wet. Okay. Once I put these rim to rim, okay, I'm going to go ahead and start kind of working to compact this together. And as long as you've got the edges pressed together, there's now a pocket of air in there. So it's not going to like squish flat. But you do want to be careful. You can see as I'm pulling with my finger and my thumb, I'm kind of working over the seam to seal that completely, right? So I'm kind of just sliding my thumb or my forefinger, whichever one's comfortable for you, across. Once you do that, you can start kind of forming this into whatever shape you need. Okay, so depending on what you're making, you can kind of squeeze this to be more of an oval, or if you want to keep it round like a sphere, or whatever you need to do, this is a good way to do it. Okay, so you can kind of start pressing and molding. Like if I was making sort of an apple form, I could kind of plan for the stem, maybe narrow this out. Okay, so you can see it's starting to look like an apple. Okay, so that's number one. We'll talk about how to kind of continue this in a second here. The second method is what I call the slice and scoop method. So what you're going to need is a piece of floss, and you're going to need a paper clip or something else similar to scoop with. Another thing that can work good would be like a key ring. I wouldn't use it with this like key thing on here, but like you can use this to kind of scoop with too. So when it comes to a slice and scoop, we're going to end up with a similar finished product. But what I normally recommend with this is that you do this when you have clay that's about soft leather hard. So this clay is plastic clay. It's really soft. I just pulled it out of the bag. This one is a little bit firmer, and typically you would have your form already sort of modeled and created. So this is something where if you feel more confident about creating your form first and just forming it to be a solid shape or whatever object it is, then you would do that first. Okay. So let's say this is my like apple form here. Okay. I've got the top sort of, right? And now I would have worked with this in the plastic stage to make sure it's just right. But once you have this, okay, then you're going to take your floss, and it's important to pull it tight. So you can see I have it wrapped around a couple of fingers. All right, you want it very tight, nice and straight. Okay, so I'm pulling apart here with my hands, and I'm going to pull straight down, pushing with my thumbs to the bottom of the form. Okay, and you can see here that split right in half. I'm going to then take my paper clip and I'm going to bend it a little bit to make it something that I can use. So, and this is a good tool actually. So if you want to kind of keep something like this, you have one paper clip, you can use it for a while. So I'm going to keep this part more like a handle, And this piece here is kind of coming up so I can kind of pinch it like this. Okay, I'm going to just bend this a little bit more to kind of round this out. Something like that is great. Okay, so it's almost like a small light bulb or a teardrop shape, something like that. Now I'm going to take this, and the first thing I want to do is sort of make sure I create some sort of a line so I don't carve too thin. Okay, so I'm going to do that over here like that, and I'm going to just start carving. Now the nice thing about this is because this paper clip is so thin, it scoops right through the clay. I can start pulling this out of here. You can see this works really well. When you start to get low, use your fingers to feel. Okay, you don't want it too thin. So whatever this is, it should be the same throughout. Okay, and there's all kinds of sculptors that use this technique with like really large sculptures. They'll sculpt it from, you know, solid, and then they slice it in half and scoop it out. Okay, I'm going to do the other side here. You can see how quickly this paper clip really does a nice job of scooping it out. This is similar to what you would call a loop tool. All right, in the ceramics world, if you had all the dream tools at home, you would have something like this with a handle on it, okay? But this works just fine. Again, I'm going to double check my thickness. I don't want to go too thin. I don't want to come out the other side. Okay, and this clay here, you can see I'm kind of squishing it into, this is all, you know, good reusable clay. You can wedge this back into usable clay. Okay, so once you do that, then you're going to again score and slip and blend. Okay, just go ahead and do one side again. I don't want to overdo the slip action here. But you can see this one. Okay, trying to get it back exactly the way that it was. You can use your fingers. This clay, like I said, should be soft, leather hard. You don't want to do this with plastic clay. It's not going to be able to hold its form. You can also use something a little more rigid like a spoon or your rib tool to kind of spread this clay. You just want to bring that seam back together. Okay, so I'm going to go in both directions here. And kind of run my fingers over. Okay. So that's method number 2. And you can see there, I've got my nice solid form, and obviously fine tuning has to happen. The last method is for something that's maybe not as spherical, right? When you're working with a sphere, we have to kind of consider that. But let's say you were making something that was a little flatter or wider, something that has sort of a shore side that's the bottom, okay? If you're doing that, an easy way to do it is to just hollow it out from the bottom. So if it's meant to sit in one direction, anything that's thicker than, like I said, about a 1/2 inch needs to be scooped out. Okay? So I'm kind of feeling throughout. Get a little bit more of this out of here. And again, you know, this is a really good tool to have. You can see it's starting to bend. You can bend it back so it's nice and flat. But now I can just kind of flatten this edge out. And to someone who's just looking at it, it looks the same, okay? But now we don't have all this extra clay in here that's going to cause problems during the drying and firing process. Ultimately, when it comes to creating a hollow form, one last important thing that you must do is create some vent holes. I always advise doing this later on before it dries out in the leather hard process, because if you're sculpting and you accidentally wipe over and seal that hole, obviously then you've just defeated the purpose, right? So you want to wait until later on in the process, but you can sort of open up your paper clip here and use this, or you can have another one that you have straight. I like to poke my holes in sneaky areas. So like, let's say I had a stem coming out here. I could poke one right next to the stem. You just want to make sure it goes all the way through. Okay. I could poke a couple on the bottom. You can feel it go through. Okay. Again, same hollow form. You got to have vent holes. Okay. That air in there is going to heat up in the kiln. It's going to expand. You have to give it somewhere for it to go. All right. This one doesn't have an enclosed structure, so this one wouldn't need the poke holes. But those are your 3 methods of creating hollow forms.